An interesting story regarding Buddy Matthews possibly finishing up with AEW has opened the door on discussion that several AEW stars may want out of the company to rejoin WWE. We're going to talk about Buddy Matthews, Malakai Black, other names, all of it as to the unhappy talents possibly wanting out of the company. Another name that has been rumored to want to rejoin WWE is Miro. We're going to talk about those rumors. Plus, we're also going to talk about Wardlow describing the AEW World Championship scene as an absolute mess. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of All Elite Wrestling. So let's get into this Buddy Matthews stuff because, as I mentioned, the first story was possibly another name wanting out of WWE. We've heard this recently about WWE approaching talents, wanting them to return to the company, leading to some AEW talents having their head turns, wanting out, etc., etc. We know when it comes to the House of Black, Malakai Black seemingly has been released by AEW, but a conditional release. He's not going to be going back to WWE, at least for the foreseeable future anyway. But the Buddy Matthews stuff has opened up quite a lot of conversation and actually some more discussion about the general feeling of certain talents that aren't happy in the AEW locker room right now. So let's get straight into this. Okay, so it was reported last night via Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful Select that AEW star Buddy Matthews may indeed be done with All Elite Wrestling. This is what the report had to say. Buddy Matthews may be done with AEW for a while, or at least on his way out. Sources familiar with the situation have told Fightful. Now, after last week's AEW Rampage Grand Slam, easy for me to say, Fightful is reporting that they were informed that the Great Muta spot was actually a way to write Buddy Matthews off television for the time being. Now, at the time, they weren't given context as to whether or not Matthews was being released, but had heard numerous times over the previous couple of months that he'd expressed dissatisfaction regarding his situation within the company. But the specifics of that aren't yet known, but Buddy Matthews was one of many people that were unhappy with their spot within All Elite Wrestling. Now, one source reportedly contacted Fightful after the New York City tapings and said they believed it was Buddy's, quote, last night. But again, that hasn't been confirmed if indeed that is accurate. Now, this past weekend at Fight Life Pro Wrestling, Buddy told the audience, quote, "Unfortunately tonight, I'm going to be the bearer of some unfortunate news. As everyone knows, the House of Black has had some issues lately. As all the members of the House, I speak beyond the wall. We want to thank you all for being members of the House. Unfortunately, I, like some other members, need to go away for a while. I need to recalibrate. I need to figure out some things. As my brother Malakai once said, this isn't goodbye, this is see you later." Now, of course, the House of Black's Malakai Black is also effectively done with All Elite Wrestling, with sources indicating that he's unable to wrestle for WWE for, quote, quite some time. Now, we don't know how long that period of time is, but he had 4 years left on a 5-year contract at the time of his conditional release from the company. Now, the door is open for him to return to AEW, but seemingly the door is pretty firmly shut for him to go to WWE, again, based on the conditions of those of that release. Now, again, when Matthews was referring to Malakai Black addressing his own future at a recent indie event, that promo saw Black shed some light on his own reported departure from AEW, revealing that he, like Buddy Matthews, needed some time away to recalibrate. It is interesting, certainly, that both Black and Matthews have used that same turn of phrase, i.e. we need to recalibrate. As I mentioned, it was a similar statement that Malakai Black gave at Prestige Wrestling on September 17. He later, of course, offered a significant amount of more clarity on his comments and indeed confirmed that he had asked AEW for his release. It was in a lengthy social media post on his Instagram. However, the story doesn't end there. This is where it gets really kind of confusing and interesting. So you would see that and you would think, right, well, clearly Buddy Matthews wants out of AEW. He's unhappy with his spots. The House of Black, whilst it's a cool faction, have they been used the best on AEW television? Probably not. When Buddy Matthews came in to AEW, there was certainly a some hope and promise, I think, that he was going to be competing higher up the card than he has been, or certainly on television, on Dynamite, more than he has been. So it would just, people were chalking up to, well, that's another name that's unhappy, and maybe he's on his way out. We don't know how long of a contract he signed with AEW. Maybe Buddy Matthews is going to leave, and maybe he goes back to WWE. However, it's not as straightforward and cut and dry as that. Now a couple of the faction members of the House of Black have seemingly thrown cold water on these stories. As I mentioned, several outlets, including Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful Select, had written that Buddy Matthews could indeed be finished with All Elite Wrestling, either for a while or possibly he was even already gone from the company. When they're saying it's his last night, that implies he's going to be released. Although there hasn't been confirmation either way, Matthews himself told the wrestling audience, as I mentioned, that he needed to go away for a while and he needed to recalibrate, which of course is the same term that Malakai Black recently used to explain him stepping away from wrestling. However, Buddy Matthews himself has now taken to social media, specifically Twitter, to very simply drop a Seinfeld gif expressing his thoughts on the rumbling out there. Now the gif is from Seinfeld and it simply says, fake. Basically saying that what has been written about me, what has been reported about me is fake. Implying that Buddy Matthews is not leaving AEW. He does not want out. It wasn't his final night. But you then have to go, well, if Buddy Matthews is saying he's not leaving, and clearly, or it's fake news, then clearly he's not leaving. But at the same time, you've got a very reputable outlet like Fightful and Sean Ross Sapp saying that, the feeling was that he's going to be gone. There's a lot of misinformation about there. What's going on? Now, of course, there's always a caveat that he hasn't specifically denied the reports, and he could be pushing back on some of the wilder rumours. He himself stirred the pot with his comments over the weekend, so it's unclear as to what is actually fake in this situation, because remember Malakai Black kind of had a similar situation where he said, some of the stuff that has been written about me, the more salacious stuff about my mental health or about my marriage, etc., that's all false. That's not true. But he did indeed confirm that he had asked for his release. So we don't really know here what Buddy Matthews is truly referring to as fake. He could just be saying, yeah, I'm not happy. I do want out of AEW, but the fact that it's my last night or I'm going to go away from wrestling for a while, that's not completely true. I don't know. That's the problem when you just tweet out a GIF. It's pretty ambiguous. And this is a situation now that has a lot of ambiguity in it. Now, meanwhile, it doesn't end there. Meanwhile, Buddy Matthews' House of Black stablemate Brody King has made clear that he has no intention of heading for the exit, akin to how possibly Malakai Black has, and maybe Buddy Matthews as well. Brody King simply tweeted out, similarly, a GIF, for this time from the Wolf of Wall Street, the famous line which says, "I'm not leaving." Yes, saying Leonardo DiCaprio saying, "I'm not leaving." So Brody King isn't going anywhere, whilst Malakai Black may be gone from AEW, and whilst Buddy Matthews may have 1 foot out of the door, 1 foot in the door, we know that Brody King is going to stick around. Now, the House of Black, when they were being put together, seemed poised to be a big prominent stable in All Elite Wrestling, but they struggled to really gain momentum. Now, of course, they recently had a feud with Sting and Darby Allin, which, of course, Miro later got involved with as they had that match at All Out. It was a bit more engaging, but I think that a lot of people saw that faction and said that could be cool, but they didn't really do all of that much on television. As I mentioned, Malakai Black requested his AEW release and announced he was stepping back from wrestling. Matthews and King lost a tag team match to Sting and Darby on Rampage Grand Slam last week, with Buddy being misted by the Great Muta before taking the pinfall. Now, of course, Buddy Matthews' status is going to be likely to become more apparent in the coming days. We'll talk about it once we get more information about it. But there's another part of this which I think is a bit of a reach, it must be said. Now, Ryan Frederick of the Wrestling Observer has kind of shared his opinion as to why he thinks people like Malakai Black, people like Buddy Matthews are keen to be released from their AEW contracts in order to rejoin WWE. And it's not necessarily for the reason you would expect. According to Frederick on the Wrestling Observer forum, the only AEW stars that are really interested in rejoining WWE are those with significant others in WWE, which would include Black and Matthews. Of course, Black is married to Zelina Vega, while Buddy Matthews is currently dating WWE superstar Rhea Ripley. Now, Frederick wrote, quote, "The only guys that really want to go back are the ones who have significant others with the other company." Now, another name that has been brought up as a result of this report is Andrade El Idolo, who of course is married to Charlotte Flair, but there have been no reports that suggest Andrade is looking to leave AEW, although there were a few rumors a few weeks ago based on his social media activity. Frankly, I think that's a bit of a reach, honestly. I think that's something that they might use as another, if they're making a list of pros and cons, leaving AEW, rejoining WWE, I think the main thing that they'll be unhappy about when it pertains to AEW, Malakai Black, Buddy Matthews, is their use on television. I think that will be the main thing. I think, of course, would it be preferable to be spending more time with your significant other? Of course it would be, and this is pro wrestling. The AEW schedule is very relaxed. You're on the road. I mean, if you don't take indie dates, you're on the road maybe once a week, twice a week, sometimes at most, at a crazy push 3 times a week. It's not that often. It's most of the time it's once a week. And obviously WWE, we know the road schedule there. It's 5 nights a week. And even if you have a lesser schedule, if your partner still has that WWE schedule, you're not going to see them as much. So I understand that they'd want to spend more time with their significant other, but I think the main source of frustration here from a business perspective is their lack of use on television, or their lack of prominence on television. As I mentioned, Malakai Black came in, he was feuding with Cody Rhodes, but that feud very quickly became about Cody Rhodes and not Malakai Black. And the House of Black faction, what have they really done on television? That whole Julia Hart story took about 10,000 years to actually get to any point. She was misted, I think it's something like in November, and then eventually she turned on the Varsity Blondes in like May or something like that. And it wasn't long-term storytelling. It just felt like we might go back to it, we might not. And during that period of time, they really didn't do anything. The House of Black would maybe just appear. They'd work on Rampage a lot. But again, Rampage isn't a show that people really watch that much. The ratings are there to prove it. And again, that's not the House of Black's fault. That's not particularly AEW's fault. I mean, they don't really give you a reason to watch that show, in fairness. But also as well, the time slot is what it is. It's pre-recorded, so you know what's going to happen. They have to shift it to Saturdays and make it 8 to 10 and make sure it's live every week. And then maybe they'll fix that show. But that's going to be an issue for AEW. And it just hasn't worked out. And I don't, Malakai Black, you saw the video, go and check it out on the channel. I really sympathized with him when he came out and said what he said, that, frankly, it was more of the other stuff going on outside of his pro wrestling career that was really the issue, with, personal issues, with, loss of life and possible suicide and, and all that kind of stuff. And then when your professional life isn't great as well, it can just pile on top of you, and he needed to take some time off, and he was injured as well. And I really sympathized with him for that. Plus, in addition, some promises that were made to him in AEW weren't fulfilled, and that just exacerbated things. And I think with Buddy Matthews, it might just be a case of, look, Buddy Matthews was a free agent for quite a while. He didn't just jump straight from being released by WWE into AEW. He did quite a few dates with New Japan over in the United States as well. And it felt like he wanted to be cautious and he wanted to be careful about not jumping straight back into a company where he wasn't going to be used properly. And unfortunately, it's kind of worked out that way. And that is really unfortunate for him. And you would say that the momentum he had when he got released by WWE, and by all accounts, there was a ton of interest in him, and he was getting bookings left, right, and center for all of these indie shows. He doesn't have that momentum at this point. And I would think he probably blames AEW partially for that, because the perception of him has changed, certainly on television. And that really is unfortunate. It is. Now, on the Wrestling Observer radio show, it has been reported that Matthews indeed, again, kind of disputing what Matthews has said on social media. Wrestling Observer Radio is reporting that Matthews has indeed taken a step away from an AEW ring, and like Malakai Black, he wants to return to WWE. This is what Dave Meltzer said on the Wrestling Observer radio show. Quote, he was on a show in Rhode Island last night and said he needed to step away and recalibrate, and even mentioned Malakai Black. It was very, very similar wording to what Malakai Black said when he did that independent show a week or two ago. It's the same situation. How it's being handled, what's going to happen, it is up in the air. He's gone for now, and he's made it it's just for now, and I'll see you soon type of thing. Like Malakai Black, they both wanted to leave, and they wanted to go to WWE. They're both under long-term contracts, and we'll have to see how this plays out. I know a lot of talent did not know of any of this until today. It wasn't like on Wednesday when they taped it, word was going around, this is Buddy's last match or anything like that. They're finding out now as well. So Meltzer's kind of saying a similar thing, that Buddy Matthews wants out and he's going to step away. Buddy Matthews is saying that's not potentially true. How does this end up? It's difficult. I mean, Meltzer even then followed up by tweeting saying, quote, looks like a few right now, referring to how many people actually want to leave AEW to go to WWE. Meltzer said, quote, looks like a few right now. I don't think this is a mass exodus, but it looks like a few want to go. Tony can legally keep them, and not sure how everything will play out, in response to Meltzer asking someone about the exodus of former NXT talents looking to leave AEW. So you're going to have to keep an eye on it, really. I think, look, the Tony Khan has to manage this the best way he can, and I think that's by trying to maintain happiness in an AEW locker room, not keeping people that don't want to be there, but at the same time not actively strengthening your competition. You could argue, though, they could do the same thing that WWE did to them. They could release a load of people, and then WWE fill their boots with all of these people, and then suddenly some of the other people aren't happy again because they're not being used. It could be cyclical like that. The difference is WWE has a lot of TV time to fill. They've got 3 hours on Monday, 2 hours on Friday. They can go back to NXT. There's other shows as well. And if they want to do a full brand split, which they could still do in the future, Triple H could do, and they go back to, a situation where it's separate pay-per-view events, which they could do, and then maybe they'll have more time to fill. So it's a difficult one. I think what Tony Khan will probably do is he's set kind of the precedent with Malakai Black. If people want to leave and they don't want to be there, don't keep them. But we might see a few conditional releases by that point, whereby they can't work for WWE for a period of time. So keep an eye on that. It's a really interesting story that I think we've only just really started to really get more information about. Now, another name that people have assumed wanted out of AEW and to rejoin WWE, of course, was Miro. Over the past few weeks, there have been reports of WWE, of course, sending out feelers to current stars under AEW contracts with the hope of possibly convincing them to return. While it was reported last week that WWE contacted the likes of Malakai Black, FTR. Another name that has been speculated is Miro, the former Rusev in WWE. However, the Wrestling Observer's Ryan Frederick has posted on the Wrestling Observer forum to say rumors of Miro wanting to return to WWE are false. He said, quote, Miro does not want to go back. The only guys that really do want to go back are the ones who have those significant others in the other company. So he's saying that actually, no, it's not a case of Miro wanting to go back. Miro's happy where he is. Now, of course, Lana, CJ Perry, is not signed to anyone. So you could argue that the rationale that he's kind of using there is really the same rationale he was using earlier by saying that actually Miro will work 1 day a week for AEW, if he's even brought to television that week, and the rest of the time he can spend at home with his wife, or majority of time with his wife. Why would he want to jeopardize that? He's got a long-term contract with AEW. He signed a short-term contract initially when he signed for him in 2020, and then come the end of 2021, I think his contract was going to expire earlier this year. He signed a 2-year deal initially, and I think now he signed a 4 or 5 year contract extension with the company and a significant pay raise. So whilst he might not be happy with the way he's being used on television, he's being paid incredibly well. He's got a lot of time on his hands to do whatever he wants, and I guess he would be satisfied, how his career is panning out to that point. Whilst he might not be happy, as mentioned, with creative and not being on television all the time, and the momentum certainly he had last year when he was TNT champion seemingly has evaporated, which is a massive shame. I would be surprised if I saw Miro go back to WWE, but I wouldn't be shocked if WWE had also put out the feelers to him like they have done with other AEW talents. Finally, TNT champion Wardlow has spoken about the AEW World Championship. Now, of course, when CM Punk captured the AEW World Championship at Double or Nothing, we all believed it was going to be the summer of Punk. Oh, we were wrong. In reality, Punk injured himself immediately after, back in June, breaking his foot during a jump into the crowd on the show following the event. He had to get surgery. Then there was an interim world champion crowned. Moxley became the interim champion before Punk returned at Quake by the Lake. Moxley and Punk faced off in a unification match 2 weeks later. Moxley squashed Punk to take both the titles. Then just 11 days later, Punk recaptured the championship at All Out before the title was vacated 3 days later due to the fallout of the AEW All Out media scrum, that backstage fight as well. Madness. Now, the vacant title was then put on the line in a tournament. Moxley won the tournament to become the first time ever someone has held the AEW World Championship for 3 times. Now, Wardlow recently spoke to the Dynamite Download podcast where he discussed the World Championship situation, claiming the title is currently in shambles, and it wouldn't be if he was given the ball. He said, quote, "The state of the heavyweight title has been in shambles for months, and the only thing I'll say about it is if Wardlow was the AEW World Heavyweight Champion, he would still be the AEW World Heavyweight Champion. It would have been the summer of Wardlow, it would have been the fall of Wardlow, and it would have been the winter of Wardlow, and it would have been the spring of Wardlow, and it would have been the effing summer again. Like, I ain't effing going nowhere. Everyone wants to hot potato that sumbitch. Hand it to me, watch me take off." Now, of course, Wardlow won the TNT Championship shortly after his victory over MJF. He recently teamed with Samoa Joe to defeat Josh Woods and Tony Nese at Rampage Grand Slam. He's not wrong. He's not wrong. The World Championship is in shambles, realistically, and these short title reigns are going to continue because Moxley is not going to hold that championship for a super long period of time. MJF is the next world champion, and frankly, MJF should hold the World Championship until maybe even All Out next year. That long, and then Wardlow should be the guy to beat him for it. Go full circle. Do a Goldberg. Have Wardlow hold the TNT Championship until All Out. Then next summer, you have title versus title. You have the TNT Champion Wardlow versus the AEW World Champion MJF. And once again, you have Wardlow defeat MJF. Then you have him holding both championships above his head. And that's how you close out the show. And that's how you really make a star in a main event with two AEW originals. That's how you do it. Whether or not they'll do that, I don't know. But there you go, guys. That's the latest AEW news stories for you. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right-hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.